session is about data-driven marketing, and my name is Jeff Allen. I've come over from the headquarters for Adobe Marketing Cloud, which is in Lehi, Utah. If any of you know Salt Lake City, Utah, it's a suburb of Salt Lake City, Utah. And I look after marketing for analytics in Adobe. There's one more seat here, and then I don't know how the fire codes work if you can sit on the aisles here. So to start with, I'm a career marketer. I've done almost 20 years in my career. I've worked in marketing, various roles, and I consider myself a data-driven marketer. How many out there are marketers? Raise your hand if you're a marketer. Okay. So how many of you would say you're data-driven marketers? Okay. How many aspire to be data-driven marketers? Good. So, it's funny, in my career, data is what separates marketers from what I call color pickers, right? So if you don't use data, then people think you just sit around with Pantone color books all day long and look for the right PMS color for whatever you're trying to do. And that perception, believe it or not, has followed me through my career at every level I've worked in. I've had CFOs as recently as 2 years ago think that that's all we did. They didn't think we used data at all. And so that's why I say I'm a data-driven marketer, because I want to be perceived in my career as one who doesn't make decisions based on my gut or based on what I happen to like, but based on data. I'll give you an example. Here's a decision you might make if you're in the hospitality business. So you're thinking about maybe a piece of print campaign you're going to send out, or maybe a website, right? Maybe some kind of ad. And you have to decide, do we want to show the resort or do we want to show the food? So how do you make that decision? Well, before data-driven marketing came along, it was, or I should say before digital marketing really hit in the late 90s, we had to make these decisions mostly with our guts. Nobody had enough budget to, if you want to sit like that on that side, there's a few seats. Nobody had the budget really to get the data to answer this question, and so they might A/B test through print, but it was difficult to understand response rates. But generally, it came down to they picked the colors. The same is true of this exercise, right? We're going to use color 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, and it really came down to, well, what do you like? What seems to be the right color? And so for data-driven marketers, these are not good answers. They're not acceptable answers to these questions, because as soon as you start making decisions like this, you're no longer a data-driven marketer. And I love this quote that for me summarizes the response to someone who picks these things just based on what they like. Your opinion, while interesting, is irrelevant. I don't know if any of you have ever been in a meeting where a whole bunch of people are sitting around a table and they're all giving opinions on some decision you're trying to make. Well, I think it should go this way. Well, no, I think it should go this way. Well, it should probably go this way because I used to work at this company, right? And the titles come out. So now we're gonna make this decision because I worked at a bigger company than you did in my last job, or I had a bigger title before, or ultimately I have the bigger title today, so I'm gonna make the decision, right? Again, none of that is data-driven marketing. My favorite, though, is when I'm in that meeting and someone says, hey, it's usually someone more junior down at the end of the table who's had their head in their laptop, and they poke up and they say, is anyone interested in what the data says about this? And immediately everybody who's been spouting opinions and showing their titles in past companies they worked for shuts up, right? And they're like, oh boy, I hope everything I was using to try and convince everybody to my opinion matches the data, because really opinions aren't relevant. They don't matter in marketing. And there's a team in marketing that's been showing up with data really for the past 15 or 20 years. Really since the internet got going, there's one team in marketing that's been showing up to meetings with much more data than everybody else, and that's been the digital team. How many work on the digital team? Okay, so a lot of you know, you got your first access to some web analytics in the late 90s, and you started really it blew your mind, right? You saw browsers and countries and paths through the website and all kinds of really interesting things. And your challenge became, and frankly still is, slimming the data back to not deliver 1,000 insights, I'm not joking, to the business, but to deliver the most relevant 3 or 4 or 5. And so this head of digital has been sitting around the CMO's boardroom table for years, and pulling out data to drive their decisions. And if any of you sat in any of the other chairs around that table, that made you uncomfortable, right? You said, hey, how come this guy's showing up with data and I don't have data? I got to get data, right? So everybody else around that table has been trying to get data as well. And some teams are doing it better than others, but all of the teams that report to the CMO today use data to drive what they're doing. And so I would submit to you that marketing is more data-driven today than it ever has been before, and it will just continue to get more data-driven. So if you sit in a chair that doesn't have as much data, your challenge is to figure out why. If you look at kind of a typical chief marketing officer's organization that we see as we talk to customers all over the world, you see some of these common departments, right? And some of you could probably find yourselves somewhere in this org chart. It's not really intended to be a perfect org chart that everybody fits into, but you could probably find your function. And so this digital team right here, again, it was the team that's had the most really time to use data and has the most technology to do their jobs. And so what I would suggest you do is think about your organization this way and think about where are we using data really well, and maybe where are we not using data much or maybe not even at all, okay? I sort of depicted how we use data at Adobe. And you can see our digital team is really good at their use of data. They have the best technologies in the world because obviously they get a good deal on Adobe Marketing Cloud. And I'm trying to get them to pay more, but they don't. And then some of the other teams, social really picked up the whole PR practice. How many PR people? Anyone in PR or spent time in PR? When we started in PR, what we used to do is we used to have a clipping service that would physically mail us clips, right? Remember this? Out of magazines and newspapers. And then what I used to do is I would either measure it with a ruler or I'd weigh it. And that was my KPI. We got, 6 inches of clips out of this press release, right? I mean, that was kind of all you had to do. Well, now in social, you can do quite a bit more, right? You can measure all kinds of things. You can measure sentiment. You can measure a lot of other things. And so social is getting really good, and PR are getting really good in their use of data and being data-driven. The Association of National Advertisers does this study every couple of years, and in the 2013 version, they asked marketers, senior marketers, what are your top issues? What are your top concerns? Can you see the top one here? 64% said accountability, and specifically developing and measuring return on marketing investments is my biggest challenge. It's the biggest thing I want to get after. And that kind of leads us to the why. So why be data-driven, right? We're not just data-driven because we're mathematicians. I doubt, I don't have a math background. I've got a little bit more of an arts background. My degree is in Russian of all things. It has nothing to do with the art or science of marketing. But I enjoy data and I enjoy pictures, right? So those work well together. But marketing's saying here, we want better accountability. And if you think about that, that to me points to why we want to be data-driven, and that is that we want the business to look at us, marketers, as good stewards of the variable marketing spend that we have, right? So if you look at all the budgets in a typical organization, the biggest variable marketing budget sits in marketing, right? And marketing has these dollars that they go out and spend, and to a lot of people in the business, they wonder, how well is this really being spent? I mean, how disciplined are these folks, right? And that's where CFOs especially tend to really get after chief marketing officers and say, you got to show me, why are you doing this event at the Eye in Amsterdam? That cost per person is way more than a pay-per-click ad on Google. You should have spent the dollars there, right? And without data, you lose that conversation, and I've lost it, by the way, every time. So data is super critical, and on top of that, what I've experienced is I want to be trusted by my peers around the executive table. And data helps build that trust in how I operate my practice. So shifting gears, I want to walk you through a customer scenario here. How many of you are in retail? Anyone in retail? Consumer electronics, maybe? Well, okay, so a few of you, you'll especially recognize what we're talking about here. I want to take you through a customer journey. This is a guy named Mark. And we'll kind of walk through what he does, and I'm not going to point out all the digital touches, all the opportunities for measurement, but I want you to just kind of catalog them in your mind as we go. So here's Mark in the center of this scene, and Mark just got a big bonus. He's a stockbroker. or a banker, and he really wants to be seen by his friends. He's a single guy. He wants to be seen as kind of the young, hip, rich guy, right? So he just got this bonus, and he's thinking, I'm going to blow the whole thing on one frivolous purchase so that everyone in my life thinks that I can spend that kind of money on everything I do, and they'll think I'm a bigger deal than I really am. So he sees this Sony billboard as he's walking through the square one day for this ultra-high definition TV. Anyone got a 4K TV yet? You probably, if you do, you probably wouldn't want to raise your hand because everyone in here is going to look at you differently. I did have a guy in one session I did in San Francisco like this, and he actually looked like Mark, and he was wearing a red T-shirt. It was awesome. We gave him a hard time. Well, this particular TV that Mark found cost $25,000. And Mark sees it, and he's like, man, I could put that in my apartment, and I could have the greatest parties. We could watch all the latest sporting events. We could watch big movies, and everyone would think I was a really big deal. So he kind of gets this vision. So a couple days later, he's sitting up on his balcony, and he starts researching the purchase. And he starts where most of us start, on Google, and he looks for what is the best ultra-high definition TV. And as he's searching around, he comes across this article in Wired, manufacturers want you to buy. He starts learning a little bit about what's going on. And of course, you notice that in every one of these settings, everywhere, everything he touches, there are customer reviews and social connections to the content. And there are ways to interact with people who've purchased in the past. And I told you $25,000, but this one on Amazon, $39,000. I don't know about you guys, but that TV's not going to make it into my house anytime soon on the budget I have. But Mark's a big deal. He's going to go after this TV. So he keeps researching. And he ends up at Best Buy. Do you guys know Best Buy here? Best Buy is an electronics retailer in the States, and they have a sub-brand for premium electronics called Magnolia. So he goes in this Magnolia section on BestBuy.com, and he sees that they have this TV. And he thinks, man, that's really cool. And then he gets distracted because, like a lot of us, whenever he's somewhere where he's a member of a loyalty program, he always wants to check his points. So he logs in here to Best Buy to see what his points balance is. And he sees he doesn't have very many points, but then he's like, wait a second, not only am I going to be a big deal to my friends, but I'm going to be a big deal to Best Buy if I buy this TV. I'm going to get a lot of points from that too. And then typical ADD, Mark goes off and thinks about buying a credit card. And then he goes off to Facebook. He's cruising around on Facebook for a little while, and he comes across this sponsored content from Best Buy. And they're talking about these ultra-high definition TVs. And he clicks through on that, and he sees a web experience he hadn't seen before on BestBuy.com, specifically tailored to buying ultra-high definition TVs. And so he goes through this web experience. You can see some of the brands he encounters as he sees that. And at the bottom, as he scrolls down through this, he sees an offer to come experience an ultra-high definition TV for yourself. And I think that's probably the next step. I probably need to actually see what 4K really looks like, because it doesn't make sense to buy this kind of TV if it's not an amazing visual experience. So he registers to go into an in-store event. And a couple days later, he's sitting in his office, and he starts thinking, this is a new technology. I need to think about, new technologies. When they come along, reliability can be an issue, right? You never want to buy the first of anything because maybe they haven't worked out all the bugs. So he goes and he starts searching for reliability, and he gets this targeted ad, which he skips over, from Best Buy. But notice now they're actually able to send content to him around this challenge of reliability. They recognize that this is an important part of the buyer journey for something this expensive, and they need to check that box of reliability for their customers. So right into their ads, they build in information about customer care and extended warranties. Well, he skips over that and goes to this article on Gizmodo to see what they have to say, and notice a Best Buy ad follows him there too. A couple days later, he's walking down the street, and his phone buzzes. And he pulls out his phone, and there's a reminder that just buzzed on his phone that he had signed up for this in-store experience at BestBuy.com. And he's like, oh, that's kind of cool. So that's right, I do need to go there. So he walks into the Best Buy and sits down and sees the Sony version of that TV. He was on a Samsung before. He sees a Sony one, and it's $25,000. and he thinks, man, this Sony TV, this is the right one. He goes through the sales pitch and he's impressed by it. And so he ends up buying the TV. And a couple days later, the TV is shipped to his apartment and it gets brought inside. And of course, he goes on to live the life that he envisioned. It did everything that he thought it would do for him socially. So a lot going on in that story, right? There's a lot of touch points, a lot of challenges for people like all of us in this room if we're going to deliver the kind of experience that Best Buy had to deliver to get Mark's business. And if you really think about what we're talking about a bunch of different channels, a bunch of different messages, a real deep understanding of how people buy, what steps they go through in their buying process, and an understanding and an ability to leverage all the different media that you work with those customers or interact with your customers in as they work their way through the experience. So what I want to do is, for the rest of our time together this afternoon, I want to just touch on 4 things that I would recommend you work on doing if you want to do something like Best Buy is doing. And these are the 4 things we're going to do. The first is to get higher resolution insights. What do I mean by that? I was watching a program in London about a year and a half ago, just a news program, and there was a woman from the FBI in the United States who was being critical of the data scientists in the FBI because there was some mystery they were trying to solve. And she said, you know, these guys, these data scientists, any data scientists in the room? Yeah, the data scientists are kind of unicorns. They're really hard to find. Try and hire one someday. They're really hard to find. And they're worth, anything they ask for, really, is what we're finding. Well, so she was making fun of the data scientists, the FBI, and she said, these guys, when they're searching for the needle in the haystack, they actually want more hay. And she said this like that was a bad thing. And I think, I would guess that most of us in this room think just like those data scientists, right? If I'm going to find the insight nobody else has, I need more data than anybody else has. And I would submit to you that more data is probably not the ultimate end game, but certainly more of the right data absolutely is. Because if I just take web data, right, and I look at what I learn about someone when they visit my website using web data, I get this detailed picture like the one you see here. That if I'm an oral surgeon and I'm trying to target an audience that maybe needs some dental work done, so far this looks pretty good, assuming that's a human, right? Now, if I want to segment also by gender, I'm out of luck. If I want to try and segment by income, I'm out of luck, right? Arguably by species. I don't know that either, except I kind of think that looks like a human, and we kind of on the web assume that that's what's visiting our website. But when I add one more data set to the picture, I start to get a little better idea of who I'm dealing with. I start to see some information that maybe would indicate gender with social posts and property data. In-store purchases gives me better resolution, loyalty programs, call center activity, and survey responses. And now I start to really see a lot about this prospect, right? So as I layer these data sets on top of each other, I get this higher resolution view, if you will, of my customer. And so as the oral surgeon, I say, perfect, this is a great prospect. We're going to send them an offer. And what all of you know is that the bulk of those offers don't hit, probably because I didn't have one more piece of data, right? And when I got that last piece of data, I said, no, she didn't have a broken tooth. She has a perfect smile. She's not a candidate, right? And so this is a way to think about offers that don't hit, right? To think about the rest of the audience you target in a segment that doesn't respond, right? You probably didn't have as precise a view of that audience as you'd like to have. And of course, the more you layer in, the more you're able to build these really high-resolution composites of your audiences. So that's my first suggestion to you, is if you've got 3 data sets, find a 4th. If you've got 1, find a 2nd, right? If you've got 10, find number 11. But enrich the data sets you have to increase the resolution of your view of your customer. The second one is actually, in the interest of time, I will put social data to work in the next section. They asked us to cut our time back. So I'm going to go through mobile, and then we'll come back to using engagement data across a lot of different areas. How many of you have a mobile app that you're responsible for? Okay. Good. Sorry, not a mobile app that's on your phone, because I know you all have that. How many of you have a mobile app at work that's part of your media mix? Okay, good. So for the rest of you, how many of you are thinking about getting a mobile app? Okay. So whether you have one or whether you don't, for me, as I sat down and said, what is it about mobile that really changes the game for us? There are a few things. The first one is that we can know who you are and where you are at any time. Now think about that. That seems simple, but the only other place you have that as a marketer is in a physical store. You don't get that anywhere else. So I suspect a lot of you are digital marketers. You don't ever get that. You don't know who they are most of the time. You certainly don't know where they are. And all of a sudden, they pop open this mobile app, and we know both, right? The other thing, by the way, that's kind of cool is for years, I've been in software for most of my career, and for years, we said any software that gets installed on a device, PC, Mac software, the one thing you can never let it do is call home. Do you know what that means? So you know when Microsoft crashes and it says, hey, do you want to send us information about that crash? Adobe products don't do that, but Microsoft products, some of ours do too. We say, would you like to help us, send us information to help us understand you better? We have to ask permission on the desktop, right? Software manufacturers do. And then people usually say no, and a few say yes, and we get some data. Well, did you ever see a mobile app ask you that question? They continuously phone home. And so with all that data coming back to us, we know where people are. And we used to, even knowing where people were using the GPS, that was cool, right? I could know within a few feet where you were using the GPS in your phone. But now with micro-location targeting, with beacons, I can know where you are, and I can know if your hand is over this glass or over this laptop, right? So that's a really powerful opportunity for us as marketers to leverage that. Geolocation targeting is again using the GPS, and for those of you who don't know how that works, it's really simple. You establish a GPS coordinate, and then you establish a radius around that point, and that becomes your geofence. So in the story of Mark, where he got within range of Best Buy back there on the street, and his phone buzzed, that was because there was a geofence set up around that Best Buy store. Now think of the implications as you set up geofences. There's no one out there governing whether you put a geofence around your own store or around your competitor's store or around your competitor's home. I don't know. Wherever you want to put those geofences, you can. And so if you think about the opportunities that opens for us, it's really exciting, I think, for marketers. So that's why I would say mobile is a game changer. And if you're not leveraging those things, you should think about how to get them into your marketing mix. So all of you should be aware of the different technologies we have in Adobe Marketing Cloud. And I won't walk you through all of these right now too specifically, except just to point out the analytics, the job of analytics, the product that I sell within the Marketing Cloud, its role is to really deliver measurement to all the different solutions. And so one of the first integrations we try to do is we add pieces to the Marketing Cloud. So as you know, we acquired Neolane a little over a year ago, and as that became part of the Marketing Cloud, we quickly got busy talking about how do we integrate analytics, Adobe Analytics, into the experience for Adobe Campaign, because it's really important to have a common foundation of analytics as you're trying to be data-driven in your marketing. So what I want to do is kind of walk through a few of the ways data applies to each of these as well. And if we go back to Mark sitting up here on the balcony and talk about, I mentioned we would talk about social. So let's just talk about how you might use social data in this scenario. The first is you want to find the social content that has a high conversion rate, right? So if I'm running that targeted ad or targeted content on Facebook, if it's converting at a high rate, then I want to do more of it. So that means I have to be able to tag up my Facebook posts, right? Somehow tag and then measure those things. The next thing is creating audiences, right? So I have Mark becomes a persona for us, right? And when I have a persona of Mark's, then I recognize, what did the Mark do? Well, Mark's click on post 10145, and Mark entered a giveaway, or Mark registered for an in-store purchase. So I start to be able to understand, what does a Mark do, right? What is the Mark journey? We'll come back to that. Obviously, we also want to find more Marks, right? We're not in this business to convert one. We're in this business to convert millions and millions, just about in any business we're in. So we use that to understand things, and you can use Facebook lookalike audiences, for example, or you can use lookalike modeling and some of our tools as well to understand, where do you have customers that match a customer who performed in a way that you thought was desirable. Finally, promoting, right? So you can promote, I can go promote post 10145. I can promote some content that's performing well, push it out further, and spend more money on it through Facebook. Shifting gears to advertising a little bit. Advertising is interesting because we tend to think about the data we get around advertising as just sort of the performance of the ad, but what we're finding is our best customers are not just looking at the performance of the ad, but they're mashing that data up with the actual site behavioral data as well. So these are the 4 metrics that we're seeing, 5 metrics that we're seeing customers who are best in class mash up with their advertising data, right? So they take the ad performance and then they go look at page views in the first visit and total time spent on the site over multiple visits. And when you put these together, what happens, by the way, any keyword marketers? Okay, so for the rest of you who, at least hopefully understand how that works, you have a huge list of keywords, right? And a few of those keywords are really expensive, and they perform really well for you, but a lot of them live in the long tail of keywords, right? They don't perform super well, but you still have them. Well, it turns out when you study your keywords using these metrics in addition, you start to find high-value words in the long tail. And those are great opportunities for ROI because you have basically keywords that are inexpensive. They're not going to deliver you huge volume, but they have a huge return on investment. And so those are places where you can go shift your dollars or euros and perform better. So with Media Optimizer, we're actually feeding this behavioral data into Media Optimizer, into the algorithm, so that we can automate some of the process of mashing that data up. How many of you use Adobe Campaign? How many of you use something like Adobe Campaign? I assume everybody has some kind of email marketing platform. Well, when you think about, for me, email tends to be the place in the marketing cloud where we see the most of the buyer's journey. And regardless of whether your buyer journey is email or social, it's on the mobile app, it's a phone call into a call center, or even a physical visit to a physical store, you have to get good at understanding how to sequence your buyer journeys so that you understand they got to step 2, and step 3 typically should be this, right? So you know what to put in front of them next to help shorten your sales cycles. And the other thing is you need to understand how to properly attribute value. So I mentioned, at the beginning of the session that I've had arguments with CFOs about whether I should spend money in an event like this or if I should just spend it all online. And he saw the higher ROI. Well, you might see that ROI higher in online spending if you're not looking at a buyer journey. But when you look at a buyer journey, you realize I need both, right? Clicks are top of the funnel things. Physical visits to an event are further down the funnel and down into your sales cycle. And so you have to understand the sequence of this stuff. So in the interest of time, because I just heard we're all out of time, this example ties to the original picture I showed you of the two photos, right, or two colors. There's an infinite number of ways you can present messages and customize experiences for your customers, and you have no chance of getting this right without data. I don't care how great your judgment is. I don't care how great your taste is. I'm sure if you don't know this already, the ugly ads tend to perform better. So good luck picking which one's the ugliest ad and making it ugly enough, especially if you have good taste. It'll frustrate you. So at the end of the day, you see a lot of different types of analytics that are going to come out of these solutions. And whether you're using these components that are coming from Adobe or they're coming from another vendor, you should be asking these data sources. How can I get more data out of you to enrich what I know about my customers? In conclusion, you all market to this world, whether it's a B2B world or a B2C world. You all sit in your offices back here and you look out at the world, and you have opportunities, if you're data-driven, to go out and change the game for your organization with these things that we're talking about here. So if you've heard something that you're not sure how we do, or if you've heard something you think you could do better, we'd love to have that conversation with you.